Welcome to the Monday Monologue. And today we're going to focus on the question, is Chinese audio gear any good? And the answer to that question is, it depends. And it depends on a lot of things. First, are you able to work on the gear yourself? And the reason I ask that is while some of these places have repair facilities here in the U.S., mailing these things is insanely expensive. Anything that's this heavy, not only is it a hassle to box this thing up so it's safe to ship, and then get it to the post office, it's insanely heavy to be taken in and out of your car, and it's just, nobody wants to be doing that. And so, if you can do minor repairs yourself, that's a plus in the side of, yes, try some China gear. The other side, no, if you can't fix it, I would question whether it would be a smart thing to do. Secondly, where are you buying it from? You can buy this Wilkinson R8 from Amazon, but it's like $1,400. But you have Amazon standing behind it at least for a short period of time. So if you get one that's dead out of the box, or it's got some issues, or you otherwise just don't like it, you've got some options on sending it back. If you order it from AliExpress or AliExpress, whatever that is, the China place, and pay $800 for it plus $400 shipping or whatever the cost is on that thing now, you are pretty much stuck with it. They're not going to take it back. You might be able to ship it to a repair facility somewhere in the U.S. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get a drop ship label from them, so you're not paying for the shipping, and it's going to cost $100 plus to ship this thing anywhere, each way. And that's why when people say, can I ship you my amp to get you to do these mods to it, that's all well and good, but if you're buying a budget amp, you're probably not going to want to spend a fortune getting it modified, and it's $200 to $250 just right out of the gate for shipping both ways. And then by the time you buy caps and the resistors and then pay my labor for me to modify this thing and the choke and all that stuff and whatever else I end up doing to this thing, you could end up in easily half to 3/4 of the purchase price just on getting someone to do the mods for you. And so, again, are you willing to listen to it out of the box? With this R8, it's pretty decent right out of the box. If you want to take it to the next level, probably not so much. And it's going to be expensive to go to the next step up. You're probably going to have to spend $3 or $4 grand to get an amp that sounds better than this one does. A tube amp anyway. So then maybe it is worth paying somebody else to work on it. You might be able to find somebody local that you can take it to and save the $250 shipping that you're going to spend. So you really got to think through all of that stuff. So then you come to the point of, is it worth spending, let's say $1,400 for this R8 and then doing the mods to it to get it to sound really good, or should I just spend $3 grand and get the better amp and just enjoy it? Well, part of it is, what do you get enjoyment out of? If you get enjoyment out of fixing things yourself or upgrading, or you just enjoy tinkering with stuff, this is a great thing to buy to have some fun experimenting with. If you like soldering and changing out capacitors and trying different mods and resistors and stuff, you're not going to be wanting to do that to a $3,000 or $4,000 amp, and there's nothing to do. It's just going to work. And so if you enjoy, experimenting and stuff, by all means, get some of this Chinese gear and have some fun with it. I had a blast working on that A50, figuring out what was wrong with it, and doing the upgrades, and and you get this great sounding amp out at the end of the deal. But a lot of people would go, why are you going to spend $1,000 on something that you got to take apart and rewire before it'll actually work like it should? And so I can't answer that question for you. Now, personally, I like building amps from scratch. Just getting a metal box from Mauser and buying all the parts. And especially if I'm designing the circuit too, when you get to the end of it and it sounds good, man, there's just some real enjoyment out of knowing that you created something from scratch, but I think it's kind of like cooking. Do you want to just buy the ingredients and cook this whole meal from scratch? Or are you okay with, like, I'm going to make this chili, but I'm going to use some, ragu spaghetti sauce for the base instead of like mixing all those spices up, and simplify the recipe. And that's kind of what these are like. These are a simplified recipe, maybe kind of even like baking something in a box. Although it doesn't come with all the ingredients, you have to add a few things. And so maybe that's a kind of a good analogy is, whether you want to make something from scratch, do you want to cook something, but you want to have to add some ingredients and you can change some things up and say, I'm going to put some little cayenne pepper in this to make it taste like you want it to. Or do you want to just go to a restaurant and order the food, then bring it out and it's cooked how they want, and hopefully you'll like it? And that's kind of what you're doing with retail amps. And one of the problems with buying just retail gear is, and you see it with a lot of these folks that talk about, I swapped this out, I tried these speakers, then I swapped this out, I did this other stuff. There's something about synergy with a system and the space that the equipment is put in. Every house is different. Most rooms are different. Very few of us have engineered listening spaces that have, professionally treated walls and engineered to be, 0 decibels across the spectrum anywhere sitting in the room. And so there's going to be peaks and valleys and stuff that you're going to want some speakers that have peaks and valleys that match your room so that it sounds good. Same thing with your amplifier. It may be with certain amounts of feedback, it sounds different, or with different tubes in it. And that's why tube rolling is so popular. Now, if you get an amp that has a lot of negative feedback, you're not going to hear much difference tube rolling. And you hear a lot more difference tube rolling in a single-ended amp than you do with a push-pull amp. Because push-pull amps kill a lot of the harmonics, especially the second harmonic, where a single-ended amp, kind of the second harmonics just kind of run free. And, they don't sound bad because they're in harmony with the music. And so when you tube roll, it's kind of tweaking those harmonics to your room, your listening preference, just like food. Some people like spicy food. Some people like more bland food. Some people like Italian food. Some people hate that stuff. Some people love vegetarian. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to go any further into that. But anyway, so if you're buying retail and you're not touching it and you're not tweaking it yourself, you're going to probably be doing a lot of swapping out of different speakers and amps and DACs and all that stuff, trying to find the perfect synergy with the system where it works for your listening preference in your space. And a great example of this was, if you watch the review of my little ELAC subwoofer, I tried it on my main system, and with my RP600Ms in that room with my 300B amp, it just didn't really sound that great. But I wasn't going to do a review based on that because I knew that there just wasn't any synergy with that subwoofer added to that system. So later I added it to my R51Ms, I think they are, the little smaller clip speakers, with my 6BM8 Spud amp, and it transformed the system. And the synergy between that subwoofer, that small tube amp, and those small bookshelf speakers was fantastic. And it really let that subwoofer shine. So just because something doesn't work well in one system, in one situation, doesn't mean it's junk. It just means it really wasn't right for that system. Now, there is some stuff out there that is absolute junk out of the box. Like, to me, that 850, unless you've got like 100-something decibel speakers and you're listening at low volumes and you're never using past 1 watt, it's not going to sound good. It goes into distortion so early, and even then, the first watt didn't sound very good to me. After I modified it, it was great. Same with the 6P1 amp that Noob Sound makes. Out of the box, it's just not real great. I was not impressed at all. Did some mods to the front end and went from this shifting by auto bias cascode thing they had set up in it to a fixed bias cascode, and totally transformed the way the little amp sounds. Still doesn't make much power, nowhere near what they advertised it at, but it turned it into a pretty cool sounding little amp. A12 was the same way. Out of the box, pretty junky. I mean, it's $400 or $500 amp that just really doesn't sound very good. After I did my mods to it, transformed it. Makes a ton of power, sounds great. It's actually a bargain in tube hi-fi. So there's some things good and bad about the ChiFi gear. I guess the other thing nice about it is some of the stuff that's hard for a lot of people, which is the chassis fabrication, it's already done. And I've got pretty decent woodworking and metalworking skills, so I kind of enjoy doing that part of the build, but I'm not sure any of my amps will ever look as nice as this R8 does just out of the box. I mean, the way they double layered the tube sockets and stuff, and the black anodized aluminum, and the way all the edges are rounded and stuff, it's just a really nice looking amplifier. And even if I was going to not use this circuit, or almost, if I was almost going to gut this thing, it's almost worth it for how nice this chassis is and how nice these output transformers work for a push-pull amp. Pretty decent power transformer. You could spend almost $1,200 getting a chassis, output transformers, and a power transformer that you get this whole amp for. So there's something to be said for that. If you're looking for a starting point for a project, maybe look for a Chinese amp that you really like the looks of, and then you can gut it and put a better circuit in it, and then you've got a cool looking amp that sounds good. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but I thought I'd talk some about Chinese audio gear. The last thing on this topic is, and it's my main problem, is you're sometimes not getting what you think you are. And the choke that came out of this amp is a great example. It's got a sticker on it that says 4 Henry, 180 milliamps. Well, 180 milliamps is not enough to drive 4 KT88 tubes running at 50 milliamps. So right there, that threw up a red flag. So I went and bought this Hammond 194G choke to put in it, which is 250 milliamps at 3 Henrys. So I measured the two chokes and something just wasn't adding up. This one's got lower DC resistance, the ones that came out of it, than the Hammond did. But the Hammond's rated at a higher milliamp with slightly less Henrys. It should have lower DC resistance. So I'm scratching my head trying to figure out what's going on, and I don't have a Henry meter. So I borrowed a cheap little Henry meter, which I'm not going to swear is 100% accurate, but when I measured the two chokes, this Hammond measured at 2.9. The one that came out of the amp measured 1.4, even though it's labeled 4 Henrys. So it's like 30% of the Henrys that it claims to be, and you can just look at it and see it's got smaller windings, and it doesn't weigh as much, so there can't be as much copper in it, or in metal. And so what's the milliamp rating? I have no idea. Can I trust the sticker? Absolutely not, because it's already wrong. It's saying it's a 4 Henry and it's a 1.4. And then makes me wonder when I hear some people saying that there's hum and other people say that there don't. Do some of them have a 4 Henry choke in them? Do some of them have a 1.4? Are they just picking up what's on the shelf or what they can get a deal on that day? Or somebody's shipping over some chokes saying, hey, we got a bunch of these left over, I'll give you a deal on, and they're throwing them in the amp. Then it makes me question every part that's inside this thing. Is any of it what it's supposed to be? And seeing how these resistors are chipping and cracking and stuff, and This isn't the first one of these I've seen close-ups of that the resistors are chipping and cracking, so I know that's a problem with these. They're using cheap resistors in it. So then I look at the other caps that have Nikon on them. Are they really Nikon caps, or are they fakes, or are they what they're rated at, or are they got different labels put on them? Can I trust those? I don't think I can. I'm going to replace every cap inside this amp just like I'm replacing every resistor inside this amp. And so, you know, that's one of the problems to me with these made in China products is the parts they're using. Are they legit? Are they fake? Are they what they say? Are they even the values that they're supposed to be? Or are they just throwing whatever that they have in the amp and then selling it as a premium product? And, you know, that's what you run into. And I think they're really shooting themselves in the foot, putting junk like this choke in their products and then trying to pass it off as a premium product, because it clearly isn't. We're not there yet. So anyway, I hope that answers the question that I've got from a few of you. Should you be buying one of these things? And the answer is, it depends. So I hope you're enjoying my channel. Had fun with these ChiFi rebuilds. Also have fun with my DIY projects. Hope to get back on them soon. I know I've promised you guys that I'm going to do the fix on that Noob Sound 6P1. I've actually had a customer that sent me one, probably been 9 months ago, that I still haven't done. And I promise I haven't forgot about you. I'm going to be doing your amp next. So that's kind of next on our plate, is to revisit the 6P1, gut it, and see what we can make out of that format of a 6S7 with two paralleled single-ended tubes driving a single transformer into 8 ohms, and see if we can actually get 6 watts out of that thing. So anyway, if you're enjoying the channel, please subscribe, please like the video, and we'll see you next week for the Monday Monologue.